The homicide of George Floyd at the hands of 3 police officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota, has ignited a tsunami of global protests in major cities of the global north and in communities and countries all across the global south. Floyd's death not only reignited the acrimonious debate on policing and institutionalized racism in North America.
Arrest the cops. Charge the cops. Charge all the cops.
What are you signifying? That you can kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and feel like you wouldn't get the wrath of God.
But also caused the people to reflect on injustices happening in their own backyards.
Susan Bogle needs justice. How is it that the police, the military, the JDF, there's no consequences being held? This is not a wagonist approach. This is about, let us start about what's happening here in our own country, Jamaica.
To discuss these issues, I'm joined by a panel of people of African descent in the Black diaspora. Dr. Angelica Bean, a sociologist and criminologist at Howard University. Grenadian-born former Liberal Canadian MP, Selena Caesar Chavans.
Their dreads, their super curly Afro puffs, their weaves, their hijabs, and their headscarves, and all other variety of hairstyles belong in schools, in the workplace, in the boardroom, and yes, even here on Parliament Hill.
Ali Gill, a Grenadian-based attorney and diplomat. Lee Jasper, the former Deputy Mayor of London.
If he's robbing the next man's nation over the road of his oil, right? This is what they do.
And Anna Kim Robinson, a human rights activist based in Kingston, Jamaica. It is Sunday, June 14th, 2020. Current US President Donald Trump and the late Argentine revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara were born on this date. Thank you for joining us for yet another installment of the Bub Report, Sunday edition. And social justice. Actually, let me start that over. Let me welcome everyone this morning to another installment of the Kellen Bub Report Sunday edition. This morning we will be discussing policing, racial and social justice, and how it affects Caribbean people in the African diaspora and Caribbean people all over the world who are based in different parts of our community. We have Mr. Ali Gill, who will be joining us from Grenada, Lee Jasper, who is the former Deputy Mayor of London, Anna Kim Robinson, and Angelica Bean. But we will start with Dr. Bean this morning. Angelica, Dr. Bean, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I keep calling you Angelica, which is also okay, I'm sure, with you. But Dr. Bean, you are a criminologist and sociologist. And one of the things that I wanted to bring you on to discuss was the issue of defunding the police, because that has been a buzzword that has emerged within the last 2 weeks, especially since in the wake of George Floyd's murder. That there is the argument that liberals and persons who are of the progressive way can actually, have difficulties with that particular slogan, because the argument is that the other side can use that to suggest that liberals and progressives and people of color do not want to have law and order in their communities. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, thank you again for inviting me onto your show. Secondly, I think that we need to have a conversation with what does it look like when we are talking about defunding the police. Are we talking about defunding the police? Are we talking about disbanding the police? That's going to look different from city to city and state to state. Because the funds for policing come from that city. So these are the residents. The residents is actually paying in order to have a police force that's in place for them. So in the wake of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud, and all of Trayvon Martin, not Trayvon Martin because he wasn't killed by police, but in the wake of all of these people actually being killed by the police force, what we're saying is that we're not getting protection from the very people that we're paying to protect us. So one of the conversations that I think that we need to have is what does defunding mean and what does disbanding mean? So defunding the police can actually mean that they're just looking at reallocating resources. So for instance, Minneapolis have committed to defunding, really dismantling their whole police department. They have like a $1.3 billion budget in Minneapolis, and they're looking at cutting $200 million. And $189 million of that money goes to their police force. So what they're looking at is reallocating those resources and actually putting those resources into mental health, hospitals, back into the Black community, into the most impoverished communities. So what my answer to you is that we need to have a conversation about what does it mean to dissolve the police department and what does it mean to defund the police department and what is that going to look like from city to city and state to state. We need to get to the root of that first.
Angelica, what does the data look like with respect to defunding the police? Do we have examples in the United States, around the world, that would have actually engaged in the process of quote unquote defunding?
Right. So I learned earlier that Camden, New Jersey have actually defunded their police department where they totally dissolved their police department and rebuilt it, and they had positive results. There are some other places around the country internationally, like Iraq, have actually defunded their police force before that they didn't have successful results. So that's another thing that we're going to have to do the research on to find out exactly what have worked and what haven't worked. And why haven't those things actually worked in different communities? And so I think one of the things that we need to talk about is that we're not looking for law and order. There is actually some research because some people are thinking that if we defund the police, then we're going to have lawlessness. But research have actually proven that because New York actually tried a pilot program where they pulled back their, it was called proactive policing for, I think, 3 months. And it proved that when they pulled back their proactive policing in New York for 3 months, that the amount of crimes and incidents that was being reported actually went down instead of going up. So that was the only example that I was able to find that actually stated where if you remove, and people that actually put something into place, in the United States, if you remove it, that the crimes actually go down instead of increasing, but we don't necessarily have all of those answers yet. That's something that we're it's new uncharted territory.
Now, the other talking point suggests that, well, there is Black on Black crime, that Black people need to engage in policing their own selves. How do you respond to that claim? I believe Candace Owens and others have actually made that claim last week.
Well, first of all, I think when people bring up Black on Black crime in the midst of when we're talking about police brutality or restructuring of the police department, it's just a distraction. So I want to start with that. First, that we don't want to be distracted from police brutality and the killing of Black bodies and people not being held accountable. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Secondly, what I would say in terms of Black on Black crime, they bring up Black on Black crime as if it's an issue that white people don't have, and they don't talk about white on white crime. So when you talk about Black on Black crime, the statistics actually show that 90% of the people that actually 90% of Black people are killing, in terms of homicide, are killing other Black people, but it shows that 83% of white people kill white people. And a reason that this is happening, so the numbers are not far-fetched. White people kill white people, Black people kill Black people. And that's because of who we are actually physically around. Majority of the people that actually kill people, they know that people that get killed typically know they're selling. And that's because of where we are physically located and the type of things that we're actually engaged in. So white on white crime and Black on Black crime, they're almost running very similar. Blacks may be a little bit higher than whites, but the numbers are almost similar. And you see more poverty in a Black community. But when you look at crime and homicide as a whole, people that are typically committing crimes are impoverished. So I think that we just need to be able to if we're going to have a conversation like this, one of the things we need to do is not start Black people and white people at the same end of the spectrum, because we don't start at the same end of the spectrum. We are arrest more, we're incarcerated more, and our sentences are longer. When we get out, we don't have the same opportunities, and we don't have the same opportunities our white counterparts have. So these conversations need to be more nuanced, and we can't just throw Black on Black crime when we're talking about police brutality. So I would just go back to the same argument. It's a distraction. Black on Black, crime happens. White on white crime happens. Talk about white on white crime. Talk about Black on Black crime. But right now we're talking about police brutality and reforming or disbanding or disfunding the police.
Now, you indicated that this moment, it sounds like it's right to enact a lot of the reforms that you have actually conducted research on.
Yeah.
And what makes you think that this moment is different from other moments in history, when in fact we had other instances, other galvanizing moments? For example, when Eric Garner was killed, there were mass protests across the country. What makes you think that this moment is different?
I think one of the things about social movements is that when major political players get involved, it can just become a movement by itself. It'll be labeled as a movement when major political figures actually get involved. And we've had people that have been historically silent that could have said something that are saying something now. Now, I say this carefully because I don't want to qualify my answer with a white response. I'm not going to do that. I don't feel like we have to have, I don't need to validate who I am as a Black woman or what's going on in the Black community by automatically saying if somebody white says something, then it validates, the fact that we've been dying. But what I do want to say is there is more outrage. There is more people speaking up that haven't had the opportunity to speak up. So police are able to speak up at this time. City officials are able to speak up. Well, Minneapolis voted, to dismantle their police. Presidents have always spoke up, but I believe we have more political figures that are actually talking about it. And we have major corporations, that are backing. So if you look at people that are putting out major statements, now that don't necessarily translate into action. We're still looking for the policy, the change, and for the killing of Black lives to go down. So right now we just have symbolism. We have people that are vocally expressing that they want to have change, that have historically haven't had they had the opportunity to speak up and they didn't, but they're doing it. And so I feel that we can feel it more on the ground because you have people that wasn't doing it before. Like I said, major corporations or political figures that's speaking up now, and we can actually see the change in policy. It's changing, So that would be my answer to your question.
And finally, Angelica, a lot of these corporations have actually been critiqued for engaging in bandwagonism.
Yeah.
Right? So sure, certainly the community probably welcomes the support, but don't you think that it's a bit overkill?
Somebody that's, okay, so I believe in protesting. I'm out there on the streets, beating the streets with all of our people, and I've been doing it, for a minute as when I found out that it should be done. Yeah, I do feel like some people are bandwagon. I'm hoping and praying that it actually raised more awareness and that people actually want to learn because of the bandwagon of it. I'm just hoping that it translates into policy. I don't need you to post, I'm with Black Lives Matter, when your CEO is the racist. He ain't hiring us. He ain't putting us into corporate positions. I'm still not the CEO. I'm still getting hired at less, it's still a wage gap. There's still racial, disparities. But although those things are true, I don't want to be cynical and say that these people are not going to move into that direction. What I'm going to say is I'm going to look, I'm going to pray, I'm going to be watchful, I'm going to be on the ground, I'm going to be fighting, I'm going to do my research, I'm going to talk about what we need to talk about, and we can move from there. But I want to see the results in our people stop dying. Quit killing us. Give us more money, change the policies, put these things into place. I don't need you to say that you with me. I need to see that in your actions. So, yeah, I agree with you that it's most definitely some bandwagon going on, but it's also that bandwagon is giving people the opportunity to talk about what that they couldn't talk about before. And we just gonna have to deal with you saying it the wrong way, doing it the wrong way, and get through that process. It's gonna be a process for all of us. So this moment is different. It feels different, and we should embrace it.
All right. Dr. Bean, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And you enjoy your Sunday. Stay safe. We are still in COVIDious times.
All righty. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we will now be taking a break. I have actually a monologue from two comedians who have actually been reflecting on this moment in time. And when we come back, we will welcome the rest of the panel and we will continue our discussion. Thank you for joining us today on the Bub Report, Sunday edition.
I can't tell you, as a man, watching another man go through something like that, what it makes you feel like. I didn't watch the tape for a week. I didn't watch it. I saw a still picture. I said, I don't want to see this because I can't unsee it. But when I finally watched it, I understood nobody's going home. Anyone who sees this, well, they're going to be furious.
When did punching someone in the head become a law enforcement technique? The cops need to make up their minds. They do a river dance on your skull, and then when they're putting you in the car, they say, watch your head. We need to stop saying most cops are good like we know that to be true. I hope it's true, but I need some evidence, unlike cops. The bad ones, not the good ones. Problem is, again, we don't really know what that percentage is. That's the question I'm asking tonight. If most cops are good, why are there so many videos of them being bad? Just in the last month, we've seen just a few bad ones beating the suntan lotion off a skinny girl in a bikini, completely atypical officers mercilessly wailing on a homeless guy in Oregon, and totally non-representative policemen beating a black man in Arizona. That's a lot of videos of guys who barely exist doing shit that hardly ever happens. Not to mention the Milwaukee Bucks Sterling Brown getting tased for a crime white people can't even imagine existing while black. This is why NFL players want to take a knee.
Welcome back. I have the pleasure of being joined by Anna Kim Robinson, who is based in Colombia, but she's of Jamaican citizenship. And we also have the former deputy mayor of London, the Honorable Lee Jasper. Thank you so much for joining us. And I have the Honorable Selena Caesar Chavance, who's actually from Pomrose in St. David's originally, but she served as a member of parliament in the Canadian House of Commons, and she actually was part of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. And so we'll probably have to explore why you left the Liberal Party, the Liberal government. And then we have from Grenada, Ambassador Ali Gill, His Excellency Ali Gill, who is Grenada's ambassador to CARICOM, and who has been writing on these issues of race for a long time. On a personal note, I have to say that Ali Gill was also my history teacher in high school at the Presentation College. So thank you, Mr. Gill, for joining us. I would begin with MP Chavance. Madam Chavance, tell us, what motivated you? What was the reasoning behind your decision to leave Justin Trudeau's government? Did race have anything to do with it?
Well, I would say that there was a number of factors. There was a lot of advocacy for a number of initiatives for the Black community. And although there were community for the first time in Canadian history in our 2018 budget, it was a minimal amount of money that was presented forward in the budget. I did not think it was enough. And I was in part of the discussions around how much money would be allocated to that community. So I thought it was really insightful to see that the only Black female member of parliament out of 338 people, someone who had served as his parliamentary secretary, was not involved in those discussions. As well, other issues like mandatory minimums, which we know disproportionately impact people of color and Indigenous and Black people, to be specific, were part of our campaign promise. It did not happen. It did not materialize because the Liberal Party thought it would be weak, perceived as being weak on crime. Expungements for cannabis, which we legalized, we did not expunge the records of, again, Black people who disproportionately were imprisoned for small amounts of cannabis. There were a number of reasons why, personal reasons as well, why I left, but I thought that the open, transparent, bold, transformative government that Trudeau had promised did not materialize in those 4 years with a majority government.
And Mr. Jasper, I would turn to you. You served as deputy mayor. Now, during that time, are you really satisfied with the work that Ken Livingstone was able to do on issues of police reform? Because since Ken Livingstone departed office, I mean, these issues of race and policing are still persistent in the Black community in England.
No, I think that even with 8 years, trying to turn around a empire, which is the Metropolitan Police Service, with a £3.2 billion budget, for a mayor that only has tangential responsibilities for policing, is always going to be an exercise in soft diplomacy. So we were able to do some stuff, but what it taught me is the fundamental requirement for structural reform in terms of police accountability and governance, discipline and training that would really be required to make the fundamental paradigm shift that we were talking about. So we made marginal difference in the 8 years he was mayor, and we've seen that eviscerate after the loss of that mayoralty, and things have become incredibly much worse as a result.
Now, we have seen that the George Floyd murder in the United States actually resonated in England. What do you think accounts for that kind of resonance?
I think we have our own cases. Sarah Reid, Sean Rigg, Mark Duggan, Kingsley Burrell. There's a whole host of cases where we have disproportionate Black deaths in police custody, in prisons and mental health institutions, immigration detention centres. So it resonates here as if it was one of our own. I also think that the virality of the modern age in which these videos can be seen instantly had an effect. And thirdly, I think it was the trauma of watching those 8 minutes, 46 seconds, which I could barely watch. And I know that the impact upon communities here was to trigger our own traumas in relation to what we've seen. And it's not just here in the United Kingdom. If you see the demonstrations in Paris, France this weekend, where the French gendarmes are tear gassing and baton rounding tens of thousands of people who came out for Adam Traoré, who was suffocated by 8 French police officers. And you look at the shooting even in Brazil of a 14-year-old boy who was shot in the back by Brazilian police less than 3 weeks ago, or indeed that the fact that in Australia, Aboriginal deaths in custody have doubled in the last 12 months, with one particular nasty incident where a man in prison, David Dunga, is recorded of saying, "I can't breathe," for 12 times before he finally leaves his mortal coil. Means that this is not just an issue for America, it's an issue for the international African diaspora across the world.
And I would bring in the rest of the panel. Do we agree that this issue is an issue that has universal connotations, as the deputy mayor said, for the African diaspora? If Mr. Gill, you actually wrote on this last week, right? So do you agree that there is some resonance for the entire African diaspora, that this affects us all? Mr. Gill, can you hear me? I don't think he can hear us.
Can
Yes, go on.
No, I'm not at all. It's just yeah, it's picking up. So are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, yes.
I'm not hearing you clearly at all.
Oh, you're not hearing me. All right, let's see if we
Yes.
can resolve that.
Well, thank you
Can
very
you?
much for inviting me. Okay, yes, there's a bad turn.
Bad connection. I would get back to you. So log back on, log off, and log back in. So again, my question to the rest of you, and Anna Kim, I didn't get that question, that first question to you, but what do you think? Do you think that has resonance for all of us in the African diaspora?
Yeah, I believe that it resonates across wherever you are as Afro descendants. You know, the racism, it manifests itself different, but it's the same in terms of the impact on the lives of Black persons. So I can speak, for example, like from Jamaica and my work as a human rights activist, where you see extrajudicial killing, like we have among the highest in the world when it comes to corruption and just like killing of police of persons, Black persons. I mean, majority of Jamaicans Black, but the low socioeconomic background, where it's just the impact on the lives of Black people, it's the same across the board. Just recently in Jamaica, we have the Susan Boyle, where members of the police force went in and somehow there was an altercation and they ended up shooting. She's disabled 3 times. And we have scenarios like that throughout, like almost every single day, and nothing comes of it. We have a man who his name is Noel, just died in prison after waiting 40 years without being tried, like stuff like this. And here in Colombia, the work that we do here in Colombia is working with the Afro-Colombians, and they've been displaced every single day. Like every day, there's assassination of Afro-Colombian social leaders who are advocating for the rights of Afro-Colombians. Just recently, again, we have our own in Colombia, like George Floyd. We have Anderson Arbadela is just one recent name that comes to mind. He was shot by the police for no apparent reason, and nothing comes of the situation. And so what we're having to do here is to have that conversation about the systematic racism that is in Colombia that affects disproportionately the life of Black Colombians. So everything that is going on everywhere that I've lived, and I've lived a lot of places in Latin America. I've lived in the Dominican Republic, I've lived in Mexico. It's the same sort of impact when it comes to, just Black life not having any meaning, and not really valuing, not really having any value, where they're killed indiscriminately and nothing comes of it, where they're among the poorest, wherever they live, there are no infrastructure, there's nothing. It's like they're forgotten, they're always vulnerable. And so across the diaspora, this situation, this racism, and some country, for example, in Jamaica, they will say it's not racism, it's colorism, but it's the same thing, it's on the same spectrum. It's the foundation of this is racism, where those who are of darker complexion, their life are less significant, and these sort of injustices are brought against them with no recourse.
Mrs. Shabazz?
I would have to agree 100%, and I'm glad that Anna Kim spoke about the tentacles of racism. This is not just about killing lives. It is about systemic issues that penetrate our healthcare system, our education system. When we show up for interviews, when we are disproportionately have negative impacts in our healthcare system, and the outcomes are the same, where we're either ill-treated or we die as a result of not getting those treatments. In our education system, when our children show up to school, but they are suspended at higher rates, we're talking about actually seeing somebody die on national TV, what we'd call a modern day lynching. But it happens every day, little by little, with our children, with our people, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. And I'm glad the previous speaker brought up the Indigenous community, because in Canada, Black and Indigenous communities are overrepresented in our prison system. We have
Mhm.
lower health outcomes. Our education system continues to disproportionately do ill by our children. And that is something that I hope, as we're creating this awareness around George Floyd's murder, we don't just look at policing, we look at every single system that has a racist, negative impact on our people, starting from our education system, going all the way up, and
Mhm.
including policing as well.
Now, Mr. Vance, there is this idea that Canada is so much better than the United States that it is actually the true liberal North. Americans tend to want to move, for example, to Canada, especially after the election of Donald Trump. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would want to move to Canada after the election of Donald Trump myself. But but to say that the grass is greener on the other side, I think it's a numbers game. The United States has, of course, a proportionately larger number of Black Americans, people of African descent. And when you think about the proportionality, we have the exact same issues where people here, I mean, just in Whitby, we had Defonte Miller beaten up by police. He lost his eye. We've had Regis Korchinski Paquette just over the last couple of weeks have a police interaction calling for help for a mental health issue and ends up dead. We have indigenous women shot 8 times. I mean, these are issues that are happening right across the world. I think that what is happening in America, because there's such a large population and they tend to use up a lot of oxygen, are creating that awareness that countries around the world are leveraging and allowing these Black voices and indigenous voices to come to the forefront, because they're saying, hey, me too, it's happening here too. And don't think just by moving across the border it's going to be any easier. You're going to have to fight the same battles with the same intensity.
And
Now,
one of the
yes, go on,
One of the
Annika,
things
and I'll
I'd
bring in
like to
Mr.
add is
Gill.
that one of the positive I see coming out of this movement here is that, for example, here in Colombia, they've been voicing concern, they've been advocating, but it's just not loud enough. But with this movement and tagging on to this movement, it's amplifying their voice. And again, it's the same thing here in Colombia. The indigenous and Black population, they're at the bottom of the bottom. It's almost impossible, next to impossible, for an indigenous person or someone from the indigenous community or the Black community to matriculate to beyond high school, and so when you deny persons, so there's no sign that is saying, okay, whites only, or in the case of Latin America, mestizos only. But when you make the system so the subtle racism, and you create the structures that prevent them, you're pretty much saying mestizos only, and you're denying them that ability to get education, which is one of probably the surest way to help them to improve their socioeconomic condition, so that they can occupy spaces within the society. And so I am happy for this movement. So just tomorrow, we're going to be having a protest that is going to speak about the issue of racism in Colombia and the impact that it has been having on Black Colombians and indigenous population, which we've always been doing. But because of what is going on, because of the George Floyd, protest and the awareness around it, that the voices of Colombians are amplified and they're able to tell their story. And that is what I look forward to see what comes out of this. But in terms of one positive I see for now is giving other persons around the world to share their stories, so that we can see that the issues are the same. The impact on Black lives are the same across the board, manifesting in different ways, but it's the same. So it's not just America, like it's happening everywhere.
Now, Mr. Gill, if I can get to you, in your article in the Now Grenada publication last week, you said, "Let us be clear, the killing of unarmed Black men in America is not some random act by deviant white police officers. These actions are symptomatic of the system that currently exists. These white police officers understand that they may not be charged for these offenses. If they are charged, they may not be convicted. And if convicted, they may be pardoned or at least get a light sentence. They know that." Mr. Gill, can you expand on that idea of sort of extrajudicial privilege that you think policing has? in the United States?
Thank you very much, Kellen, and for inviting me on the program with such an esteemed panel. If we look at the history of that sort of violence in the United States, and we don't have to go far back, maybe within the last 5 to 10 years, you would see that there are other incidences of police brutality, of unarmed black men dying in the hands of white police officers who, unless it is caught on video, as in this case with George Floyd, or we get to know about it somehow, those officers are never charged. If they are charged, even in this case of George Floyd, you would appreciate the length of time investigations continued before anyone was charged. If a black person, myself, yourself, would have committed an offense where the life of somebody and was lost, one would have expected the police to take prompt action. That has not happened in the case of George Floyd. It is because of the protests and so on. These officers were eventually charged. They charged one. The others looked on while he killed a man 8 minutes 46 seconds. His knees was on the gentleman's throat. I can't breathe. The guy shouting out for help. The other officers looked around. And after Chauvin was charged, it took another week or so before the other guys were charged for aiding and abetting. I'm a trained legal practitioner. I do a lot of criminal law in the Caribbean. I am not an expert in American criminal law, but at the same time, I understand the basic principles. Now these men are charged. You take them to court and so on, and you bring them before a white jury. It has happened in the past where even when they are charged, the jury comes back and say not guilty, and they walk the street the next day. So the practice is there. The practice is there repeatedly, time and time again, where these white police officers get away with murder, so to speak. But just to pick up on what Anna was pointing out earlier on, and to the other panelists spoke about, it's happening in London, it's happening in Colombia, it's happening in Canada. Now, you would observe in my article that I call for internationalization. One of our black countries must bring a resolution before the United Nations with regards to this issue. The United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, where systemic racism against colored people, not just black people, indigenous people, and so on, that must be brought to the fore before the United Nations. And a resolution must be brought. Because you see, in other societies where these powerful countries, they look on other countries, they look at other territories and say, there are human rights abuses. The issue of George Floyd is a human rights abuse. And other countries must be, we in the less developed world, the less powerful countries must table this issue strongly on the United Nations agenda. Let us use this groundswell that we are getting from this George Floyd issue across the world. Let us use this groundswell to get the United Nations to act. Now, the United States is not a member of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. They are not a member. The United States, again, has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord, and they have moved away from all international checks and balances that we have in place to bring more multilateral approach to global issues. This particular issue of racism in America it must not remain localized to the United States. It must be internationalized. And I believe that we must use that groundswell across the world to ensure that we table that issue at the United Nations once and for all, pass a resolution, and to hold the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and so on accountable for these abuses against colored peoples.
Those are very interesting points, Mr. Gill. But on reflection, do you think, because you know that there were Black Lives Matter protests happening across the Caribbean, this is the first time I think I've actually witnessed that movement go global, right? But there were protests in Grenada, and one of the things that Grenadians expressed on social media is that it causes us as Caribbean folk to reflect on our own issues of not necessarily systemic racism, but probably systemic classism. Do you think that systemic classism is something that we have to address as a Caribbean space?
Of course. In fact, my latest publication this weekend, I dealt with a similar issue. Not so much classism, but consciousness as well. When Bob Marley many years ago spoke about emancipate yourselves and so on, we as Black people have to emancipate ourselves. In terms of, we can't be saying that Black Lives Matter and then bleaching our skin. We have to bleaching our skin to appear more white and so on. The issue of our dress, our formal wear, if I have to go to the parliament, I have to go to any formal occasions, I have to wear jacket and tie. Right? So we still have these trappings of colonialism in our society that is affecting the consciousness of Black people. So I believe that this George Floyd issue as well can inspire a consciousness among our people in terms of our dress, in terms of our speech, in terms of appreciating who we are as a people. That to my mind is extremely important, that consciousness. And interestingly, you spoke about now you see all of the protests throughout the Caribbean and so on. The Caribbean has been the hot point for Black consciousness from the days, and we have exported it to America. Marcus Mosiah Garvey from Jamaica was one of the first advocates of Black consciousness. And Stockley Carmichael, later known Kwame Ture from Trinidad and Tobago, Malcolm X, his mother, of course, is from Grenada. The Caribbean and the 1970s Black conscious movement throughout the Caribbean and so on and so forth. We, in large measure, have really and truly exported Black consciousness to the United States and so forth. You would know, Kellon, that in the US, slavery was abolished long after we did so here in the Caribbean, in 1865 or thereabouts. And 100 years later, in 1965, when the United States passed the civil laws in 65 under Johnson and so on, that's 100 years later. So even after slavery, you would have had laws in place still formalizing the segregation of Black people in the United States. When we in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, and so on were getting independence. So in many respects, the Caribbean has led, and we are in some respects, we have been more fortunate than our Black brothers and sisters in the United States in terms of the Black consciousness, in terms of obtaining independence and different things like that. So in a real manner of speaking, the Caribbean has lent itself in a very strong way to the conscious movement in the United States. It is just that in this case now, the United States is assisting the inspiration of a Black conscious movement here in the Caribbean.
All right, Mr. Gill, thank you so much. We're having a very interesting discussion. We will take a quick break and be right back. And as we go to break, I will be playing a clip from the late, great James Baldwin on issues of race. Actually, he was speaking out on issues of race after the 1968 riots that occurred following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King back then. So we will play that clip and we will be right back.
They know that, and they shut their minds against the rest of it, all the implications of being a Black father, or a Black woman, or a Black son, and all of the implications involved in a human being's endeavor to take care of his wife, to take care of his children, to raise his children to be men and women in the teeth of a structure which is built to deny that I can be a human being, or that my child can be. The great question in the country has been all the years that I've been living here, and I was born here 43 years ago, is what does a Negro want? And this question masks a terrible knowledge. I want exactly what you want. And you know what you want. I want to be left alone. I don't want any of the things that people accuse Negroes of wanting. And I don't hate you. I simply want to be able to raise my children in peace and arrive at my own maturity in my own way, in peace. I don't want to be defined by you. I think that you and I might learn a great deal from each other if you can overcome the curtain of my color. The curtain of my color is what you use to avoid facing the facts of our common history, the facts of American life. It is easy to call me a Negro or a nigger or a promising black man, but in fact, I'm a man like you.
So there we go. I need to, I keep not unmuting my mic when I get back. But as we wrap up, I want to get the entire panel back. And I did pose that question to Dr. Angelica Bean earlier. And the question is, where do we go from here? It does appear that, there is some momentum around how we begin to really discuss in an honest and real way issues of not only superficial racism, but issues of systemic racism. Anna Kim, I'm going to begin with you. Now, you are in Latin America and you work within the Latin American space. Where do you go from here in a region of the world that really views racism as a colorblind concept that doesn't appear to exist?
Well, I would just piggyback on Mr. Gill, what he commented about being conscious, and I think that we as a blacks need to recognize that we also have work to do. We also have a lot of work to do. It took like over 400 years to invalidate us, to make us feel that we were less than, to tell us everything about us is not good enough. So like comments that we make to our children in the school, for example, you look nice for a black girl, or the narratives that we keep on, that we've internalized. So we've internalized a lot about ourselves. And I think where we go from here in terms of this wave that is going on is also speak about us having work to do as well. That we have to be conscious and we have to start with our kids in the school to love everything about us and to focus on or to understand that 400 years of us being told and not being told to love ourselves, that contributes to a lot among us as Black people. And so we have to start the work on emancipating ourselves from various mental shackles that are happening. I'm seeing in Jamaica, there are schools where you can't wear your hair in an afro, like or in a puff. They will tell you that your hair is not combed. And you're like, how else am I supposed to dress my hair or comb my hair? So like it starts from us understanding that internally we have work to do. We've internalized a lot of the racism, and we have to be conscious of that and to work on the narratives that we keep on telling ourselves and our children and passing it on from generation to generation.
Psychological control is a lot to get over. You would agree with that?
Yes.
Mayor Jasper, I would get to you.
Yeah, I think I agree with that entirely. I think the extent to which we are aware of our culture gives us a very much more stronger, resilient position, informed of the sustained, systematic, global white supremacy in the form of individual institutional systems of racism in our respective countries. Having a cultural awareness of our history and standing on that gives us that resilience, gives that ability to be able to make informed decisions about how we respond to that. I think Mr. Gill's proposals are very sound, that a global push to bring this to the table of the United Nations, regardless of the orientation of the USA, is exactly where we need to be. And quite recently, we had a global Zoom discussion with the social movement in the UK, Black Sox, with Dr. Clelia Pretes from Brazil, Reverend Al Sharpton from New York, and people from France and the United Kingdom on this very theme, on this very discussion. And there's a great appetite around the world for a coming together of an international African diaspora to bring these issues to the fore in a way that is a significant difference from the individual struggle we faced in our respective countries trying to tackle it. It is when we come together, as Malcolm X always told us, it is when we bring these issues of racism onto the United Nations human rights agenda that we begin to make a real difference.
But Mr. Jasper, I don't mean to cut you. I mean, if you look at the power structure of the United Nations, we talk about the United Nations, but really and truly, you bring these resolutions, a lot of these resolutions gets vetoed by the United Nations Security Council, of which the vast majority of countries do not have control.
Well, we look at the experience of the struggle against the apartheid in South Africa. We faced very similar problems there, where motions were vetoed. But it wasn't the structural blockage of the United Nations that finally freed South Africa. It was the global movement of people against the anti-apartheid struggle that gave life to the international agenda that finally made them take the right decision. So I accept there could be structural and political blockages by these people, but the extent to which we can all march simultaneously in our countries of origin, bringing that global presence and that pressure, and the Black Lives Matter movement has shown that. I've seen more white people taking a positive anti-racist stand, holding up signs saying white silence is complicity, than I've seen in my entire lifetime. So I think the atmosphere has changed. There is a paradigm shift, and it's up to us in our respective countries to afford and give that international leadership on these very pertinent issues.
Mr. Gill?
Well, the mayor said it well, and I believe the next steps would be the internationalization and keeping the global pressure at all levels. I have noticed that the Barbadian government, the Prime Minister, stated that in the next sitting of Parliament, that the issue of Black Lives Matter would be discussed and debated in the Parliament of Barbados. That is what I think other countries should be doing. So our leaders need to do more. Our Black leaders need to do more. And so that if Barbados is taking the lead to discuss that issue in its Parliament, other CARICOM countries should be doing it. Ghana has taken a very forceful position too with regards to this Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd. The president has issued, one of the first leaders to issue a statement against it was the Ghanaian president. So that if we have other Black leaders, prime ministers, presidents from the Caribbean, from Africa, from anywhere else, tabling that issue in the Parliament, and as the mayor pointed out, let us keep the global pressure. Yes, there will be struggles at the United Nations, but as he correctly said, you keep pounding away at it. You keep pounding away at it, because to really get where we want to go in this struggle for racial equality, it cannot be localized in the US or in the UK or in Canada. They cannot fight themselves alone. All Black people, wherever they are, must stand up and be counted.
But Mr. Gill, let me challenge you on that. And you know, I keep saying this all the time. We have an issue with the history that we teach in schools, in the Caribbean specifically, right? And that also needs to change. Would you agree?
We need to change. I agree 100%. We need to change the syllabus. You see, at some levels in the Caribbean, the how history has been taught and other subjects have been taught is for us to pass, students to pass exams. But if our syllabus need to be structured in such a way and get towards the liberating the minds of our people. And that is the structural shift I believe must take place in the syllabus in the Caribbean, not just to pass exams. History is not just about dates and events and so on. The issues, all these Black Lives issues, must be discussed in our primary and secondary schools.
Okay.
So the syllabus needs to be aligned to that struggle.
Ms. Shavans, final thoughts? Where do we go from here?
So, yeah, I will go ahead and agree with some of the previous speakers, and especially Ambassador Gill around the resolution to the United Nations. I absolutely think that is a directive in which globally we could stand behind. But when it comes to our education system, I think that there needs to be a clear understanding of the pain points within our education system. My husband's his doctorate is around the factors that influence school choice to go to university for Black students. And his results have shown that guidance counselors often are the ones that steer our students away from university, away from higher education. So we're talking about George Floyd, and it's a killing of a man publicly, a public lynching. But you also have, as I said earlier, a number of our young people that are being their livelihoods are being disrupted, are being killed by institutions like our education system that don't properly allow them to have a livelihood that they need to be sustained in this global economy, in this tech economy. So when we think about racism, we cannot just think of it from a one perspective of what is happening in the United States. We need to look at all the tangential points in which Black people and Indigenous people are being killed, are being suffocated, are being marginalized further by inequalities within every single system on a municipal, on a provincial, and a federal scale, and also globally.
And Dr. Bean, you had the chance to hear a lot of our discussion, and you're back full circle. As we wrap up, where do we go from here? You mentioned earlier that there is a lot of momentum, a lot of discussion, a lot of ideas came out of this discussion as well. So any final thoughts from you as we wrap up?
I think what my strongest thought from this panel discussion is that there's a need, like all the other panelists said that I totally agree with, is there's a need for us to keep the international pressure, and specifically for African Americans and all of the other African people that are here in the United States. And we need a curriculum that have more of an international approach, so we can know how we are powerful together and what does that look like in terms of our curriculum here in the United States, so we don't feel like we're siloed. Because we're taught to be siloed from our education system and the way that they've built our curriculum. And for me, for a person who didn't go to HBCU until I was in my mid-20s, I didn't start learning my history until my 20s. So I think I think it's important for us to stick together, and I think it's important for us to turn in terms of policy and an international approach of how to deal with systematic racism, structural racism, racial disparities in all of our communities that is global. I think one of the things that we should do is to look at this thing from an international approach, to get together at the table and say, how do we look at building a stronger community for the Black diaspora internationally, globally. So I think that that's one of my major takeaways from this, is that we need to reapproach at the table with all of us at the table, so that we can have a better outcome whenever we're looking at how to address systemic racism that impacts us globally. That was
all right, Dr. Bean, thank you so much. Let me thank the panel. I know a lot of you are in different time zones. And it took a lot of work to get everyone here together today, but certainly we had a very fruitful discussion. I will be relying on your expertise again, because these conversations we need to keep having.
Yes.
And those issues will not disappear overnight. Slavery and colonialism lasted for a very long time, right? And so I tell people, in the grand scheme of things, African Americans in the United States have been free for less than 100 years.
Yeah.
If we really think about it, right? The Civil Rights Act was only in the 60s. Before that, you had Jim Crow, Okay.
Right.
So there is a lot. There is a lot. You know, I was also reading an article in the Now Grenada publication about the compensation that one slave master received for his 40 slaves. I think, no, I stand corrected. It's probably 400 slaves that he had between Grenada and Jamaica. And he received 10,000 pounds, 10,000 sterling pounds for those slaves. Now, if adjusted for inflation, 10,000 pounds in today's dollars is almost £1 trillion. That is a lot of money, right? That they receive. So there is a lot that we need to be dismantling, and we need to continue to have those discussions intelligently and move away from the sloganeering to ensure that we can get to some substantive solutions that would benefit our communities. And on that note, let me thank you. As a reminder, the West Indian community in Brooklyn, New York, they are staging a protest this afternoon. I believe they will be starting at the Grand Army Plaza. So if you are in Brooklyn, New York, and of Caribbean descent, this would be an event that the organizers are encouraging you to attend. Of course, they're also encouraging you to wear your masks and try and practice social distancing as best as possible, because New York City was actually the epicenter for the COVID-19 crisis for a long time. So on that note, let me thank the panel, and a happy Sunday to all of you.
Thank you.